what makes this deal, I mean, so many elements of it are so tragic, but the one that's really tragic is in the deal, it wipes away the war crimes that Russia has committed. It absolves them of this. And again, this is what is so devastating, because if any parts of this deal really do continue to move forward, all this it does is embolden Russia, embolden Vladimir Putin to continue to do this, as well as Iran and North Korea, as well as China.
US President Donald Trump has given Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky until Thursday to accept a peace deal, which will see Kyiv surrendering land to Russia and cutting the size of its army, and also committing to never joining NATO. However, President Zelensky has said that he was being forced to choose between losing the support of the US or sacrificing their dignity. Trump was asked about Zelensky's resistance to accepting the deal.
He'll have to like it, and if he doesn't like it, then, they should just keep fighting, I guess.
The suggestion that he made, though, was that if he doesn't accept it, that the U.S. would pull back its support for Ukraine.
Well, at some point he's going to have to accept something. He hasn't accepted. You remember right in the Oval Office not so long ago, I said, you don't have the cards. Don't forget, I inherited this war. This war never would have happened. I inherited this war. And I thought he should have made a deal a year ago, 2 years ago. The ultimate deal would have been if it never started. That would have been the good deal. That could have been done too if you had the right president, but you didn't have the right president.
Now, Heather Conley is the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State under George W. Bush and joins us now. Heather, welcome back to the show.
Great to be with you.
Heather, what did you make of this 28-point peace plan?
Well, in many respects, we saw the outlines of it back in February when Special Envoy Witkoff first went to Moscow. Obviously, it's been substantially enlarged to include things such as arms control. But as even the President Trump's own words reflected, this is basically the same place we were in February. We just took a 9-month roller coaster ride to get back basically where we started, with the Trump administration and Vice President Vance pressuring President Zelensky.
I mean, there's wide criticism that this is a capitulation plan. This is pretty much everything that President Putin set out to do. Topple Zelensky. Part of the plan is that the moment the peace plan goes into action, within 100 days, Ukraine has to hold elections. Ukraine committing never to join NATO, no NATO troops on the ground. I mean, these are all aims that President Putin's kicked off the war with. Do you accept that those are fair criticisms of the plan?
Oh, my goodness. It's absolutely Vladimir Putin's dream of root causes. And it goes well beyond just Ukraine. It is asserting directives on the future of European security, where, military fighters can be placed. And so 100%, it's absolutely unacceptable. It was unacceptable that this plan was produced without input from our European allies. Certainly, key European leaders like Prime Minister Starmer and others have spent an enormous amount of time investing in this conversation to get a very different outcome. And it feels like we just went right back to square one again, where we were in the Oval Office in February. But I will say this is not President Zelensky's decision alone. And this is where this timeline, this artificial timeline of on Thursday, the Ukrainian people have to make this decision. I think the national conversation that President Zelensky began about, do we hold on to sovereignty, or do we hold on to our U.S. partnership, dignity, the partner? He's beginning to prepare them to make some decisions. But I think the leadership that was at the G20, I think they're taking this plan as the beginning of a conversation that is going to have to go on for quite some time.
The Times is reporting on their website right now that the Trump peace plan will leave Ukraine vulnerable, warn G20 allies. Do you think Donald Trump is going to be open for what the Times is referring to as additional work to be done on this 28-point proposal negotiated by the US and Russia? Or do you think Donald Trump is expecting a yay or nay response?
Yeah, I think you have sort of two messages coming out right now, which is very confusing. I think you have Secretary of the Army Driscoll and his message and delivery to President Zelensky in Kyiv, as well as the vice president saying, this is it. You have to decide, no negotiation, take it or leave it, or we're going to penalize you. I think you see from President Trump a little bit more flexibility. I think, and so how the European leaders are trying to thread that needle is by saying, again, this is a great basis. We have to build on this. We thank President Trump for seeking peace. So there are some elements, meaning elements of helping Ukraine actually have concrete security guarantees, something that the Europeans have been working on for months. Let's begin with that core element, and then let's see what parts of this 28 plan. I don't think there's going to be many parts that we can start building to strengthen Ukraine. Now, it's important to note that there'll be negotiations tomorrow in Geneva with the national security advisors of various countries, but we also have Secretary Rubio and Mr. Witkoff arriving in Geneva, and you're going to see these tensions demanding, this is it, you've got to sign on it in 3 days, and having that negotiation. And quite frankly, we'll have to see how those two play out.
Heather, how prominent a topic is this with the American people? We were speaking earlier about Marjorie Taylor Greene saying that she's leaving Congress. I think January 5th is going to be her last day in Congress. Part of her criticism of the Trump administration, and of course, Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of the big supporters of Donald Trump and the MAGA movement. But part of her criticism is that Trump is being involved too much in foreign affairs issues. She said, America first. He's getting too involved in Middle East and Ukraine. How big of a topic is this among Donald Trump supporters, the peace between Russia and Ukraine?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we've really been consumed, obviously, following the election on November 4th, which was a clear message, I think, to Marjorie Taylor Greene's comments that the American people are hurting, affordability, cost of living, and foreign policy does not address those issues, and getting, back to basics of what President Trump was very much elected to do to lower costs. So you're absolutely right. In some ways, this continues to be a time absorber of President Trump, and this is where he very much sees in his second term. He is the peace deliverer, if you will. Foreign policy is what he's been doing all week, with on Monday hosting Mohammed bin Salman and others. He wants to stick on this foreign policy, but the domestic environment is really crying for him to focus on that. So far, the president is sticking to his role as making peace, and he sees this Russia and Ukraine conflict as that one that's ultimately been elusive for him. And you see so many hallmarks of the Gaza 20-point plan in the Russia 28-point plan in the Ukraine to force both sides. But after the deal is done, that's where the details are the hardest to implement. And this is where I think the attention wanes, getting the deal, the publicity of the deal, but not necessarily the massive geostrategic consequences that this deal, if forced, will have ripple effects across the entire international system.
And just finally, Heather, that relationship between President Trump and President Putin, it seems to blow hot and cold. Of course, everyone remembers that meeting in Alaska. It was full of smiles, handshakes. Then there was a rebuff from the president of saying, well, I've done everything I can. If he's not going to come to the table, we might have to introduce some really hard-hitting sanctions. Now we're back to actually looking at what's on the Putin checklist and putting that in the 28-point plan. What do you think is at the heart of that relationship between the two presidents?
Oh, that is the million-dollar question that has just eluded all of us since the 2016 election. I guess my best answer is President Trump has affinity with President Putin's leadership, the leadership of a strong man, and getting his way, and just admires that quality. He not only admires it in Vladimir Putin, he admires it in Xi Jinping. Of course, we do not admire repression of citizens at all. I think what makes this deal, I mean, so many elements of it are so tragic, but the one that's really tragic is in the deal, it wipes away the war crimes that Russia has committed. It absolves some of this. And again, this is what is so devastating, because if any parts of this deal really do continue to move forward, all this it does is embolden Russia, embolden Vladimir Putin to continue to do this, as well as Iran and North Korea, as well as China. So why he has that affinity, I don't know, but it's devastating to American strategic interests and that of our allies. So I hope the deal is totally reworked, that supports Ukrainians' sovereignty and the ability to seek justice, which is what the Ukrainian people are desperate for.
Heather, thanks again so much for your time. Thank you for joining us. Heather Conley, there, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State under President George W. Bush.